Welcome back to Timo's Dinky Detailing. Today I'm going to be working on a Dinky 151 Triumph 1800 Saloon. This is actually a attractive model. I kind of like the Air Force insignia on the side. That's from about 1944 for a dark background aircraft. This one is a car, but anyway, it's a nice toy. It's in decent shape. It obviously needs to be a little bit fixed up and painted and rust removed, etc. So I'm starting out. I'm not using the drill. I'm finding I've used this Dremel with the carbide tip on a few jobs now, and I'm kind of liking doing it. It gives me a little bit more control than the drill. Of course, I'm still going to have to use the drill to thread those or tap those holes so I can put screws to hold the thing back together again. So the base obviously is quite rusty. So those three posts I'll have to drill holes in and tap them. So that goes into the milling machine for that. I don't know yet of a way to safely and easily drill those posts without putting it into a vise and at least in a drill press. In this case, the milling machine is just as good. Now you notice that tap that I'm using, it's got a big spiral. That's called a spiral flute tap, and that's the spiral of the flute is to make the swarf come out of the hole instead of pushing it down into the hole. You can see those bits of swarf sticking out from the tap. So this that makes it simpler because you're not going to have a bunch of stuff at the bottom of the hole, and it doesn't limit your hole depth. So there's the hubs, and I'm trying to look for a color ahead of time. So this is pretty close, and I think that's what I'm going to use. And now on this one I'm going back again to a method that I forgot about briefly for taking off these axles, or taking the hubs off of the axles, and that is to file the end off. This one is very bent. I'm only doing this because I want to have the length of the original axle so that I can make new axles to that length. I don't need two of them, so the other one I'm just going to cut off. It's a lot faster and easier, and I'm going to throw out those little segments of axle. Now I'm stacking them onto the axle so that I can set it up for stripping the paint, and I'm also putting screws into those threaded holes so that the holes don't get filled up with any gunk in the rest of the process. And now I take it outside, put boiling water and caustic soda. Now this model appears to have original paint, so there's no layers, so it came off pretty easily and pretty thoroughly. Now there is some paint or bluing on that base, and there's rust as well, so the caustic soda, it cleans up quite a bit, but it doesn't take all the rust off of it, so I'm putting it into the rust remover, and I'll leave that overnight or so. Now here's the main casting. It's in pretty good shape, but on the roof there's some scratches, pretty deep looking scratches, so I might have to clean that up before I paint it, but the rest of the casting is really good. There's one headlight is a little bit loose, so there's the headlights are put in separately, and there's a little wing thing that's spread out. I'm just going to glue it back in. So now it goes to the drill press and my wire wheel, and I'm just going to show you a couple seconds of that, but you can see it starts to come out nice and shiny. Now to get those deep scratches, I don't know what happened there, but it cut some pretty deep scratches, and the whole roof in general has a lot of you can see where the metal was cooling in the die, and it left a bunch of gaps, and so I'm going to fill those. It's only on the roof, it's nowhere else on the model that it looks like that. So that's good, because that's the easiest part for me to to fill and then sand, because it's a wide open surface. So I go in and basically I take off almost all of that spot and glaze putty, but when I'm sanding it and filing it and stuff, it leaves the putty inside those cavities, those air gaps. So now, next day, I pull this out and it's taken all the rust off, and so that's pretty much ready to paint. It's a little bit bent, so I'll probably have to straighten that out. Now I'm taking two of these off because this toy doesn't have the little ring on the roof, so I can't put my new clamp on it. So this must be before they had that system. And somebody told me that clamp, or that I used as a clamp, that ring, was to put the toy on some spinning dowels, which is just a round piece of steel, so that the toy would spin while it was being painted. And I kind of believe that. I've seen something similar in videos from the Corgi toys, not from Dinky, but from Corgi toys, and I'm sure there's a lot of similarities. So I put this thing on there so that you can hold it without clamping like onto those little webs that hold the front wheels. I don't. That's what I usually do, but if I put this little piece of sheet metal there, it doesn't damage and doesn't leave a mark behind behind the tires. So there, I put some 5-minute epoxy on the top and the bottom, and leave that to dry, and that's going to be just fine. So here I've painted the thing now, and there's really nothing now on it that you can see. It's a perfect casting. So this is the paint. I looked at this ahead of time, and it looked pretty close. When you open it up, it's a nice dark blue, but then after you mix it, it came out a little bit lighter than I expected. I should have probably mixed it up before I chose it as a color. But anyway, it's a nice color. It's a little bit darker blue. There were lighter ones and there were darker ones. So there was all kinds of colors. So it's not necessarily a wrong color, but it matches my workbench cover. So now I go into the spray booth and I give this thing a very nice coat. This is the Mr. Hobby paint still. Mr. Hobby, the aqueous paint. Apparently they don't make it anymore. At least my hobby shop doesn't sell it anymore. So I'm going to be switching over to Tamiya paints. I find they work very well, and Vallejo or Vallejo. Those paints are also good. I like them. So now back to the base. As I said, it looks ready to paint, but it is a little bit bent up. So I get my parallel pliers out and work at that for a little while. It really doesn't need very much. Sometimes if it's bent very difficult, I'll have to hammer on it on top of the vise. In this case, it's kind of just sort of gradually bent over the years, being in a toy box or just being manhandled by some normal child. So that's the inside painted. The outside we'll get later. For the outside, I put the non-stick paper that's already been used before, so that when I put my magnet on there, it doesn't lift any of the paint on. It's not just on the inside anyway, but that's why I do the outside after the inside, so that I don't have to clamp to it. So this is that paint for the tires or for the wheels, and I guess I thought it was a little bit lighter than the paint that I had, so I add a little bit of white to this to get the look that I think it's supposed to be. It's not really scientific what I do, but there you can see it's a little bit lighter. And I'm showing you that leveling thinner. It's a slow drying thinner for your airbrushing. and when you spray it on, it dries slower so that it comes out smoother. It has a chance to self-level, and it makes it shinier. So here I've got my hubs on a string, and I can rotate it around, get all the angles covered. So this one, I would like to tape this up, and I've got the chrome spray from Revell, and there's no way I'm going to be able to tape around those headlights. I thought about taking the headlights out and putting them in again afterwards, and I said, you know what, I don't want to get into bending those little fan blade wings that you spread out to get those headlights into the casting. So I have to go in with the fine paintbrush, and I'm using the Mr. Hobby metallic silver paint, which is a bit thin for doing the hand painting. It works really well for the airbrush. But I had to do 2 coats on this because the blue was going to show through otherwise. So I'm really taking my time with this. I think this is a double speed, so it looks like I'm moving at a normal speed, but if I just put it there in real life speed, it looks like I'm moving in slow motion. So what am I to do? Speed the video up. I'm trying to match the way that the original one was. It's just those bars in the grill, the cooling strips in the grill that were painted silver. So I'm trying to match that, and it shows up in online pictures of this toy as well. And if you haven't guessed already, this is going to be a straight restoration. I'm not adding anything to it. And I'm just purely making it into what the toy looked like when it was new, sometime in the 40s probably. So while you're watching this, you might want to just look down and click the like button. Doesn't cost you anything. Nobody knows that you clicked it, but Google knows, and it can actually help me, and with very low commitment. It costs nothing to click it. That's the best one to click. If you haven't already subscribed, then you can also subscribe, and if you like it, you can send it to your friends, a link to your friends so they can see, and maybe they would enjoy my videos as well. So I got these headlights painted pretty good. It's a little bit easier to paint these ones because it's like the front is like a big round ball, and it kind of discourages you from painting outside of the circular radius because the brush tends to come off of the ball. So anyway, I found that pretty easy to paint with a small brush. I seriously thought about putting decals right back on the doors, those aircraft decals. They are Second World War, and the yellow circle was designed so that it could go on a dark surface. So it was actually applied by the child who owned this toy before, and using the correct decal. So that's pretty impressive, and it actually kind of looked cool. But I'm going back to the original one, and that's going to have to be good enough. So this is Shine Red, and this thing is it's a thing for women who paint nails in the nail salon. It's a dot maker. You put a dab of paint on it, and you just dab it, and it makes a nice perfect dot. I really like using the dot painter. So now I'm going to make some new axles, and here I've got a piece left over from another job that's just a tiny bit longer than the original axle, and it goes into this jig. And this is a bench jig for 5C collets. I don't have a 5C collet for these axles, so I made my own little collet adapter so I can hold this thing while I cut off with the Dremel tool. It's a pretty simple operation. It's a little bit tricky choosing the right length of these axles. I don't like to have them too long, and if they're too short, you can't put the mushrooms on the ends. Maybe one day I'll buy the correct collet for this. I think it's a 2mm. Now I'm using this. This is one of my carbide burrs for the Dremel tool, and I'm using it just to clean off the inside where I've cut those off. I've cleaned off the inside of the hole so that when you put the nail into the end of my mushroom, it doesn't hang up on the burr on the inside. So it takes the burr out of there. So here's my axle mushrooms, and they're kind of have a bronze finish the way I bought them. So I take them, I put them in this little chuck, and I go to the grinder where I have a buffing wheel and put some compound on it, and I go in and I polish. And it's such a tiny thing, it takes about 5 seconds to polish it. There it took even less. So I come back out and I go for my rubber tires. And I'm choosing which side is the better side, because I didn't do any grinding of these things. I just painted them. So there's a side that's better than the other side, and so I just choose the better side. I have a feeling they did that in the factory as well. So there I've got my little nail, and I push it in there with some 5-minute epoxy. I make sure I have enough in there that it's clinging to the side walls of that steel tubing. And then I push my mushroom in. Now that axle is a free axle until you bolt the whole thing together. This one is trapped in the base. So there I put a little bit of the glue and push my mushroom in. This is a simple model, so I'm able to show you all the steps, all the little details of how it's put together, and still keep it at a normal length of time. So there, I've got my body is done, and I'm taking out these screws. Now I've often used these, most of the time I've used these screws after they've been painted to put the model back together, but I found that many times I would damage the paint on the screw, or I would have trouble even getting the Allen head in. Because they've been painted. So I've got 3 brand new screws. These screws aren't very expensive. They're stainless steel. They look good. I have the black ones. They probably would look good too, but these ones look like a rivet, maybe a slightly more polished rivet, and I kind of like that too. So pretty much anything goes, but right now my mood is to put these stainless screws in there. There you have it. So just to remind you of what it started out like, and let's see what it looks like now. So I think this toy looks like an original, like it would have come out of the box. It's very simplistic compared to later Dinky toys and Corgi toys. There's no windows, there's no seats. It's a very basic sort of toy. But they have their own charm for sure. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Timo's Dinky Detailing. Until next time, be seeing you!